Hey everybody, Objectively Dan here. Okay, so correct me if I'm missing something, but this passage is racist, right? This is from Second Nephi from the Book of Mormon, chapter 5, verses 21 through 22. And he had caused the cursing to come upon them, yea, even a sore cursing, because of their iniquity. For behold, they had hardened their hearts against him, and that they had become like unto a flint. Wherefore, as they were white and exceedingly fair and delightsome, and that they may not be enticing unto my people, the Lord God did cause a skin of blackness to come upon them. And thus saith the Lord God, I will cause that they shall be loathsome unto thy people, save that they shall repent of their iniquities. Am I missing something here? Because this sounds pretty bad. If you think you can defend this, you should call into the show because it is starting right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, Objectively Dan. This is the live call-in show that happens every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we talk to people about what they believe and why. And if you'd like to call us, you can do that at 512-991-9242 or through your computer at tiny.cc/calldw. Truth Wanted is, of course, a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And every single week, I always have a special guest. This week is no different. It is Aaron Jenson joining me today. Aaron, welcome to Truth Wanted.
YOLO, Dan. It's great to be here.
YOLO. I like it. That's a new one. Well, I mean, YOLO's not new, but I don't think anyone has ever said YOLO in regards to being on Truth Wanted. That's pretty cool.
It's ironic.
It's ironic. I suppose so. Yeah. I haven't heard, it's been a few years since I've heard a YOLO. That was a good hearty YOLO right there. Yeah, which I appreciate that.
It sounds kind of like hello, but it's not.
It does kind of sound like hello, and I think you could trick people with that as well. If you're like YOLO and they're like, "Oh, what does that mean?" It's like, it's Bulgarian. It's Bulgarian for hello, you know. Anyway, this is, of course, Truth Wanted. This is a call-in show. We've got open lines right now, guys, so you should definitely call in, especially if you haven't called in before. Why not call in tonight? Maybe the universe is providing an opportunity for you to call in, and you should do it. But before we get to the calls, we have to talk to you guys about our segment, the We Want the Truth segment, the thing that we're doing every week where we're reading a prompt, and we are getting your best answers. I'm excited to read you guys these answers because last week's prompt was, what does the J in J Mike really stand for? And here are our favorite answers. Number 3 comes from Miranda Rensberger. The J in J Mike stands for Johnny P. Angel, which is a great meta joke there. I really like this joke. This is a good one. There's a lot of layers to this, and I appreciate this very much so. So thank you, Miranda, for giving me that joyous laugh. Number 2 comes from Chuck Gatos, who says Jenga Mike because he was a clumsy kid and tended to knock things over a lot. And I like this lore about J Mike that, I think alternatively, it would be really funny if he was just like really into Jenga. So they just called him Jenga Mike, which is just like a very funny character trait. I don't know. Nothing more to say about that. But our number 1 comment comes from Miranda Rensberger as well, who says, if I were to reason like some people, I might say all the Duggar kids have names that start with J Mike. All the Duggar kids have names that start with J. J Mike starts with J. Therefore, J Mike is the secret 20th Duggar kid. Which would be, again, amazing lore. I would love to add to J Mike's lore. His
perfect logic. Logic right there.
I think J Mike would agree with that. I think that's a perfectly valid syllogism.
I think so.
And as we know, all valid syllogisms are true. So therefore, this is true, and that's a syllogism within itself. So yeah,
Duggar. You heard it here first.
J Mike, the secret Duggar. I like that. We all need.
I'd watch that show. I'd watch that show.
I'd watch that too. It's like J Mike like trying to like keep his secret from like the rest of the world, you know, and like him just like balancing his daily life. I like this.
I'd like the segments where he snuck back home and had conversations with the Duggars.
Yeah. There's a lot you could do with that concept. I would love to see J. Mike fan fiction on the subject. So please submit to me your best fan fiction about J. Mike, and I will read it on the show probably. But for this week, we are doing a caption contest for our thing. So audio listeners, sorry, you don't get to participate as much in this one, but we are going to put this picture on the screen here in just a second. There it is. We want you guys to caption this image. And this actually was from last week's show. It's J. Mike being very despondent, I would say. He's got his hands over his face.
It is a double face palm. He's got his face is covered by both his hands, and you can say it under those hands, he's either weeping or gnashing of teeth or both. There's some real sorrow under those hands.
I don't know what kind of face I'm doing there. I don't know if I'm delighting in it or if I'm also I think I'm kind of responding like WTF is happening here. But I want you guys to caption this image, leave your best comments below, and we'll read the top 3 answers next week. So I would love to see what you guys have to say about this one. So a little bit different this time. We're doing a little bit of a caption contest thing. So we'll see how you guys like it.
Sorry, podcast listeners.
Sorry, podcast listeners. And you know, I love you guys because I'm also an audio person, but this is a pretty funny picture. So I also want to see what the captions are. So of course, I'm always talking to people on this show. We kind of talk a lot. And this week I'm talking to you, Aaron Jenson. So Aaron, who are you, Aaron? What is you? What is an Aaron Jenson?
Well, I wanted, can I share my caption for
Oh yeah. You have a caption.
Your picture? I have a caption, yeah.
What's your caption for the image? Let's put it back on screen real quick.
Yeah, let's put that back up here. There we go.
Yeah.
So my caption is J. Mike realizing that Dan showed up to the show sober.
Yeah. Listen. That would be how do I put this? I've always showed up to the show sober. I don't know if I could say the same for J. Mike. I bet there's been a time or two where he hasn't, and I will never know which ones, but I could see it for J. Mike's sake, you know.
If J. Mike ever showed up to a show not sober, he pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, he's a trooper. Yeah. But no, we're all typically sober on these shows. In case anyone is wondering, that is a joke. Just putting that out there. But anyway,
I might have to excuse myself then.
I say typically because I don't know if I can't speak for everyone's experience. I can only speak for mine. I typically get accused of being high when I actually really don't smoke weed. So I don't know what the deal is there, but that's just a little accusation that gets thrown around sometimes. I think it's because of the subject matter that this show.
Just got the vibe, man.
I guess I have the vibe. I guess I have the stoner kid vibe. But it's not really my thing. So don't know what to say about that. But back to you, Aaron. We're talking about Aaron Jenson. Aaron Jenson, you've been on other ACA shows in the past. So this isn't your first ACA appearance.
It's not. I've been appearing on the nonprofits once a month since January. Yes. And I've had a really good time over there, meeting a lot of good people, smart people, and talking about current events, what's going on in the world, and trying not to despair and too much with what we see out there.
Nonprofits sister show talks a lot about the news. If you want to hear a skeptic's take on the news, go listen to Nonprofits. They're doing that work.
There's a rumor that it's the flagship show of the ACA. From what I've heard,
I can neither confirm nor deny that rumor.
Okay,
sad to say, because that's never been an official mantra here on Truth Wanted. Maybe on other shows.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
But like I said, just can't confirm or deny. Can't confirm or deny. That's all I'll say about it. But yes, Aaron Jenson, you have an interesting background, I would say, compared to a lot of people that I have on here, because you have an interesting intersection with Mormonism.
I do. I was born and raised Mormon.
Yes.
More appropriately today, I guess, known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yes.
And they want to be called Latter-day Saints now, or LDS. They're trying to distance themselves from the Mormon moniker, but Mormon is way easier and funner and better to say than LDS or Latter-day Saints. Plus everybody already knows what a Mormon is. So
right. Yeah. We've had ex-Mormon guests on the show before, and we've had ex-Mormons call in. I've never, as far as I can remember, I don't think an actual Mormon has called into the show. So if you're a Mormon watching this, we would love to talk to you. But ex-Mormons, of course, always want to hear about your experiences as well. Because Mormonism to me is just so fascinating. It's just like, I grew up in a Baptist sort of background. I went to a Methodist church, but culturally as Baptist is complicated. Baptists love nothing more than to talk shit about other denominations. And boy, do they love talking shit about the Mormons. They love saying how they're polygamous and how they believe in multiple gods and that everybody gets their own planet. They love the highlight reels. You hear the same stuff all around. And so my cultural knowledge of Mormonism up until I was an adult was just these kind of trivia points until I actually heard the stories of Mormons and actually looked into, the skepticism behind the Mormon religion itself. I didn't realize how extra bad shit it is, because you get all the bad shittery of Christianity, but then you get to add some extra stuff to it too. There's some extra sauce that comes with it. So it's not that I'm saying that Mormonism is somehow better in some regards. I was just not even told all the weirdest parts. Honestly, it's even weirder than I thought it was.
Yeah, there's lots of weird stuff. If you read your official church stuff, you don't get too weird things. The official church manuals, they keep it pretty tame. But if you look out and kind of the edges of things, and especially in early church history, some of the early church leaders, they were proponents of some pretty crazy things, things like Adam was actually God, stuff like that. Yeah, it's just it can get pretty crazy.
Yeah, so tell me about this experience being Mormon, because I knew one Mormon kid growing up, and I'm sure everyone always thought of him as the Mormon kid. Did you feel like you were outsized as a Mormon growing up, or is that where you're mostly insular within your community, so it didn't bother you that much?
Yeah, I grew up in Oregon, so everybody knows you're Mormon, but nobody really makes a big deal about it. Yeah, born and raised. Fair. I actually served a mission, came back, got married in the temple. Did the whole, I like to call it the Mormon checklist. Right, there's this checklist for Mormon. It's not written down anywhere, but there's this checklist. You get married, you get baptized, you receive the priesthood, you go on a mission, you come back, you get married in the temple, you have kids. So I was a true believing TBM, true believing Mormon.
Yeah, trademark.
Did all the things, checked all the boxes, tried to share the gospel with my friends, tried to do all the things that the church wants you to do, paid your tithing, went to the temple, all that fun stuff.
So you do all that, and you're also here on this show. So something must have happened in between that and here. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So what happened was I had a son. I had our first child. And when I was holding my son, when you have your kids, you have so much love for them. It's almost overwhelming. And I was sitting there thinking, I have so much love for my son, but I don't feel that same love from God, who supposedly loves me even more than that. And that's really what started me down the path of kind of questioning. It was really an emotional process for me of just not feeling it. Yeah. And just trying for, the church is really big on enduring to the end and being faithful and being obedient and doing what you're serving and doing what you're supposed to do. And I tried, and I did that for years and years and years, but the emotions just weren't there. I never felt connected to God. I never felt like anybody was listening, felt alone spiritually. And it just got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't pretend. I tried to fake it till I became it, to fake it till I make it. And I just couldn't do it. And so 5-6 years ago, I finally said, I can't do this anymore. And I left.
Wow. Yeah. And so what was that experience like, leaving Mormon? Because to leave Mormonism, there's extra hurdles. I don't know if everybody realizes this, but it's not the same thing as just saying oh, I'm just not going to be a Christian anymore, and you don't show up to your church, right? There's some extra barriers, I think, in place, right?
Yeah, I've heard horror stories where people just don't get left alone and they get harassed, and that has not been my experience. I've never had anybody come over and harass me. I've never had anybody come over and even ask, "Hey, why'd you leave?" I just kind of stopped going and just kind of have been left alone.
Now, did you officially rescind your membership? Because I know that there's
I have not officially rescinded my membership yet. I haven't bothered to take the time. I don't know. I haven't bothered to do it yet. I'm not sure.
This is another point that Exmos make, which is they want to send a letter to rescind their membership, and sometimes the letters get conveniently lost, or there's a little bit of back and forth, right? It's not always just okay, here you go. It's like canceling your gym membership, right? Yes. You can't just cancel your gym membership. You got to send something in the mail, or you got to do something. It's crazy. They should make that illegal, by the way. But
so I haven't tried to do that. But like I said, I've never encountered anybody who's had one of those horror stories. The horror stories, of course, they're terrible, and so they get a lot of play and a lot more notice than other, non-interesting stories. So
sure,
that may be it.
But you did experience this crisis of faith. Obviously, was impactful for you. I imagine it sounded like you committed a lot of your life to the institution of the Mormon Church. So
served a mission. At church every week for 2 or 3 hours at least, and then usually everybody's got what's called a calling or a service opportunity where you go and serve other people. And so there's leadership roles, there's teaching roles, there's all sorts of things that require time outside on Sunday. It's a 24/7. It's really enforced that when you're Mormon, you're living it 24/7. It's not just a Sunday religion. Yeah. They really stress obedience, keeping the commandments, enduring to the end, doing good, being good.
There is a positive identity sort of structure around being Mormon, right?
Yes. It is very strong culture, very strong. It's very structured. Yeah. You go to a church meeting anywhere in the world, and it's going to be pretty much the same thing.
So when you're saying, "Oh, I'm having these doubts," and you're kind of deconstructing all of these, I mean, obviously that has to have some sort of ramifications for you, both personally and I imagine maybe even professionally. Like what was that like? Did your family respond to this well when you tried to explain what happened? I mean, was there pushback with this?
Well, not really. My family's been very accepting. My parents have been very accepting. I haven't received too much pushback. Occasionally I'll get cards in the mail that are religiously themed, or texts that are religiously themed, and I just kind of email or mail religiously themed. I just kind of ignore them. They're not really interesting to me. The biggest impact was on my wife. She took it really hard, and we're still together and we're still working through it. But it's tough. It's tough. She still believes and I don't, and there's some challenges there.
Yeah, and you're also, I mean, you got married within this institution as well.
Yeah, we got married in the temple, which is like, the pinnacle of what you're supposed to do.
And so you have these psychological sort of pillars in this religion. It's like, I like how you mentioned in your story that it wasn't just a logical breakdown. This was an emotional breakdown for you.
It was, yeah.
And I think that's important. We sometimes like to think, oh, well, I just realized all this stuff was silly and then I left it behind. But it's really more than that. Sometimes we can rationalize after the fact, but for a lot of us, it's just like we started to not feel it anymore, and that's an important part of the process, because I think a religion, especially as sort of highly active as Mormonism is, it requires your participation. It requires something from you that's more than just here's a punch card, right? It's like you're actively doing all these things. You're participating in the community. You are upholding these values and traditions that are expected upon you, and that's exhausting within itself. And dealing with the ramifications of that, I imagine, can also be exhausting emotionally.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I wasn't feeling it, and when you go to church and you hear all the "you should be doing," "you should be doing," "you should be doings," I couldn't take the "should." You should be doing things. You should be doing your genealogy work. You should be reading the scriptures every day. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And I wasn't doing all those things. And the guilt is overwhelming when you go to church and you try to do better and you try to do good, but my heart just wasn't in it. I just wasn't really interested in doing those things. And I finally just accepted it's just not what I wanted. It's not who I am. And when I first left the church, I still believed the church was true. I just couldn't do it emotionally. And I kind of stood out there in that spot where I thought the church was true, but I was just angry and mad at God and didn't want anything to do with him. I said to myself, God knows where I am. If he's interested in having me back, then he knows where I am and he can come get me. And then it wasn't until 2 or 3 years ago where I was just browsing YouTube and saw an ACA show, saw an episode or segment from Atheist Experience and Matt Dillahunty. And I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense, and started listening to their podcast. And it wasn't, a month, 2 months before I was like, oh, I'm totally an atheist. Yeah.
Interesting. So is that a label that you feel comfortable describing yourself with now as atheist?
Yes, very much. Yeah.
What does that label mean?
Not so much, because a lot of people say, well, an atheist claims that there's no God. And listening to the ACA shows, I realized, no, we don't claim there's no God. We just don't accept the claim that there's a God. We just don't believe that there is a God.
Sure.
There could be a God somewhere. He, she, they, it has not made himself, herself, themself, itself known to me. So I can't say there's no God, but I don't believe any claims about God that I've heard.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I think a lot of atheists can cite their lack of belief definition of atheism to like the atheist experience in particular. I think that kind of popularized that view quite a bit. That was certainly the first time I think I heard that understanding of atheism as well, which is interesting.
I've always been a little bit skeptical. My whole life I've been a kind of a skeptical person, like, really? Especially when you every month in the church they have what are called a testimony meeting where the mic is open. It's an open mic. Right. Anybody can get up and share their spiritual experiences and what they're feeling about God and the church and things like that. And people would get up there and they'd share their prayer stories about, oh, I prayed and God gave me this. And I'd always be just in my heart, that's really, how do you know that was God? Did you like put a flag in your experience and say, no, this is
Did he give a signature? Did he sign his e-signature?
Yeah. And so I was always a little bit skeptical, but I kind of set my skepticism aside because I was trying to be faithful, trying to be, what God wanted me to be and let God work out the details.
Yeah. I mean, what is, first of all, I know about the open mic testimonies because there's been controversy within the last couple of years because people have tried to point out abuses within the church by using some of those open mic nights, which is interesting. But also, like, why does something like that functionally exist if not to reaffirm yourself and others in the belief, right? Like, I don't go to an open mic night for my workplace every week and talk about how awesome my work is. That'd be weird, right? Okay, but for some reason this exists within Mormonism. And to me, like, there's a very clear psychological sort of explanation as to what that can do to somebody, right? And what its purpose could be. I don't know if that was their intention. I don't know if that's, but
those started early days of the church. We're talking first couple years of the church, they would have testimony meetings, and it just kind of carried on through the whole rest of the history of the church.
Yeah. I love Mormonism is just such an American religion, which I
really
love.
is.
Everybody says that, right? Everybody says Mormonism is the American religion, but like, it's so true. And just like the values that it espouses and the traditions that have developed from it blending within the American way of life as well. It's so fascinating to me. I love looking into Mormonism because I get to see it as an outsider looking in and just be utterly fascinated. But I imagine just growing up with that is very different. Do you ever feel like when you talk to other atheists that you're isolated in that experience because Mormonism is so different? Or do you think that there is more in common with other Christianities than there are differences?
No, I don't feel isolated from other atheists at all. It's the doctrine. Everybody's got different doctrines. I mean, you talk to 100 different Christians, they're all going to believe 100 different things about, and Mormonism and Baptists and Seventh-day Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses. We could go on forever listing them all. It's just the doctrines, they're different. But when you leave it, you're still an atheist when you're done.
Yeah. I wonder, because one of the reasons that Mormonism is fascinating is because of the character of Joseph Smith and the early church sort of figureheads that surrounded him, right? You get this sort of biography that you don't get with other religious traditions because of its more recency, right? Like, we know way more about Joseph Smith than we'll ever know about Muhammad or Jesus or Buddha or any of these folks, right? And I have to wonder, if Jesus was around at the same time Joseph Smith was, what kind of things what perspective will we have about Jesus that would be very different than what we have about Joseph Smith? Because like looking at Joseph Smith, like, everyone looks at his life and it's like, yeah, duh, total cult leader. Like, absolutely. Displayed all the signs. But would we say the same things about these other guys from history? I think maybe we would, but that's my speculation.
Yeah, it's hard to say. There's not a lot of records. There's no firsthand accounts of Jesus, so we don't even know who he really was, what he really said. Everything's 20, 30 years after he died, right? That's the soonest writings we have about him. So that's kind of disappointing. But Joseph Smith, he is a fascinating character.
Yeah,
I think he must have been one of the most charismatic people to have ever walked the earth, to be honest, because the way he was able to get people to follow him, the doctrines that he was able to develop, the books that he was able to write, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, the Pearl of Great Price, all these scriptures that are unique to Mormonism, they all pretty much came from him. I still don't know exactly where the Book of Mormon originated from. It's 500 plus pages. And it just seems pretty remarkable that one individual person could write that many pages.
Well, that's because it wasn't Joseph Smith there, and it was the angel. It was the angel.
He was just translating. I stand corrected.
I was about to say Moroni, but it's not Moroni. It's
to be able to get people to follow you and believe what they believed, and to start in New York and then go to Ohio, to get people to sacrifice everything they had, and then to get kicked out of Ohio and to go to Missouri to do the same thing there. And then for it to get so bad that the governor of Missouri made it legal to kill Mormons.
Yeah. Right. And also people like burning down buildings and shit. Like, a lot of crazy stuff.
It was crazy. History. And then to finally get moved to Illinois. And that's where he finally was martyred. And then to move across the plains and move into Utah. That's you must have been super, super charismatic to be able to do that.
I think so too. I actually agree with your assessment here. He has to have been, if not one of the most extremely charismatic individuals, at least like up there, because that's a lot to do with people.
I think we've all met those people where they're like, you feel like, oh, this person is my best friend, and you just meet them, right? They're super outgoing and charismatic, and they just make you feel like you're the bee's knees and the best thing ever, and you just want to be their friend and hang out with them all the time. I imagine that this Joseph Smith just up to a whole nother level.
What's especially interesting too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Joseph Smith didn't come from a background of particular status, right?
No, they were very poor. Right. I can't remember how many brothers and sisters he had, but I think he had a 3rd grade education.
Yeah, I heard he was functionally illiterate, which is, again, like, not to say that you need to be literate to be able to convince people, but like to say that, I got this book here. I mean, like, how do you convince other people, oh, look, there's this book and it came from an angel and I have this, but I can't even read and write. I don't know. That's a weird thing.
Even if he plagiarized the Book of Mormon, large parts of it from other sources, when you look back at the records of how he translated the Book of Mormon, there's no record of anybody admitting that he was reading off of paper or that he was copying from other sources. Basically the translation process was he had this stone, this little brown rock that he found somewhere, and he'd put it into a hat, like an Abraham Lincoln stovepipe, and he'd either look into it or he'd cover his whole face with it and dictate the Book of Mormon to whoever was scribe.
Yeah.
And taking everybody at their word, assuming that he just did it off the top of his head, that means he had to have remembered all those stories and all those sources that he was plagiarizing from and remix them in his head and verbalize them out at the same time that he was remixing them. I think he might have been some kind of genius as well, to be honest.
Or it was the Angel Moroni, Aaron. Oh, have we not considered that this was the Angel Moroni?
Or it could have been actual written records that he was translating. But I came to find out after I left the church that unfortunately the traditional view that we have in the church that they have of Joseph Smith translating the Book of Mormon, where he's got the gold plates, right? So the story is that he received this big book of gold, literal gold metal plates with writing on them, and that he would put them on the table, and there would be a divider between him and his scribe, and he would, read from the letters and dictate to his scribe. No, that never happened. There's no record of that ever actually happening. Like I said, he used the seer stone, or the peep stone, as they would call it. He called it a peep stone in a hat to translate the Book of Mormon, and didn't actually use the Book of Mormon. And you can find, there's an article on the church's website that confirms that's how Joseph Smith translated the Book of Mormon.
This is what I've heard as well, that this hat thing that's going on, the magic hat, I don't know what you call that, but just like one little tidbit, just that's one little slice of Mormonism. And again, that's just Joseph Smith. There's a lot of other characters that really appear in the history of Mormonism. That is really fascinating. So I'm glad.
We shouldn't get started on Brigham Young. That guy was a piece of work. Whereas Joseph was charismatic, Brigham Young was just a great a-hole.
Brigham Young is like, I'm trying to think of a modern equivalent, but he would absolutely be the worst. I would probably despise him if I met him in real life. Joseph Smith, there's at least there has to be a likable tendency to, it's like a roguish tendency, you kind of like the villain a little bit. That's how I feel when I look at Joseph Smith. It's like the Joker to Batman. Okay, there's a little bit that you kind of like. Brigham Young is like, I don't know. He's like the Penguin. He's not No, the Penguin's kind of likable too if it's played by Danny DeVito.
He's like Bane. He's like the authoritarian. I'm in charge. Everybody's gonna do what I say.
Yeah,
I know what's right from wrong. There will be no dissent. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was a strict guy.
Honestly, Aaron, I would love to keep talking to you about Mormonism stuff, but this is a call-in show, and we actually have quite a bit of callers that want to talk to us. Are you ready to talk to some folks?
I am nervous but excited. Yeah, let's get to it.
We got a lot of people that want to talk to us. So, folks, if you're on the line, stay on the line, and we're going to try to get to everybody today. Would love to do that. Before we do get to the callers, though, I have to do the Patron of the Week, because every single week I always thank at least one person, pretty much one person. I don't know why I say at least. It's always one person on the Patreon. That's tiny.cc/PatreonTW. Of course, I want to thank everybody that donates, but we're going to give that shout out to one person this week. And this week's Patron of the Week is LB. Short, simple, and sweet. I like it. Thank you, LB, and thank you to everybody that donates on the Patreon. You guys rock.
Are we sure it's not pound? We're sure it's not pound?
It might be pound. That's true. I call it as I see it. You see it. Maybe it's not as simple. I don't know.
Or lub.
I'm no Joseph Smith. I can't interpret things. Maybe if I print it out and put it in a hat with a rock, I could tell you what exactly it says.
Maybe.
But now is not the time or place for that, because we got to talk to some people. Aaron,
let's do it.
This is a call-in show, so let's do it. I think this is a great one to maybe start with. Cooper, you've been on the line since before the show got started. Cooper from New York, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, how you guys doing tonight?
Good. Well, what did you want to talk to us about today?
Yes, I am a doubting, questioning theist, and would love absolutely nothing more to leave my wretched faith behind. Okay. But have not just boulders in the way, but mountains in the way.
Okay, let's talk about it. Tell me about you, Cooper. What's your background, and what are these boulders you're looking at?
I have more than one cognitive disorder, or not disorder, but condition that kind of almost make it like hypnotize me into believing. I still catch myself praying to God and talking to Jesus and the Holy Spirit and the saints and the angels, even though I'm not Catholic. And like I hear, like in my heart, I feel like in myself, like I feel like I get clear answers, but like the promises that they give me never seem to come. It's like it shall be coming, these promises and the hopes of them, at least the promises will be coming around the mountain any minute now, any day, but that day never arrives.
Yeah. So first off, let me say, whether you suffer from any sort of cognitive disorder or not, what you're experiencing is actually not only a very normal thing, but an incredibly common one. You may not hear folks like us talk about it a lot because for some of us, we've been so far removed from the religion that it's not a thing that we struggle with as much. But I can speak for myself in at least telling you that when I was deconstructing my faith, I was absolutely still having a desire to pray and absolutely thinking that there was something deep inside of me that was calling out to something greater. Or perhaps maybe I was getting some of my prayers answered or something heard from something beyond myself. That's not true for just Christians as well. That's true for like way other beliefs, right? I mean, I think this is a pretty common enough phenomenon that it's something that we can look at and even study and wonder why this happens. There's a couple of explanations as to why. One of them is quite obvious, I think, when you look at it, and it's the psychological comfort that brings, right? You've kind of been socially proofed into this. What I mean by social proof is you've looked at other people and you've seen that this is something that they do when they're looking for something or calming their nerves or are trying to find peace, whatever it may be. And so you kind of pick up on that and you do it for yourself. And you don't really question the results of it because everybody else seems so sure about it, right? So that kind of habit, that cognitive habit, is not something that you're just going to break from right away. It's kind of like quitting smoking. It's like, what? I mean, you still want to do that thing. So of course you're going to do it, even if it doesn't rationally make sense or if you don't think it's good for you. So I would comfort you in saying that this too will probably pass as well. It's probably not something that's going to happen the rest of your life. I don't know you, Cooper. I can't say that for sure. But what I can say is for a lot of people, it's still a thing for a while and then it just goes away. So don't worry too much about it.
Can either one of you or the both of you offer, or what advice would you offer to me or your listeners as far as like what the best way to leave faith or deconstruct is? Would it be studying the sciences? Would it be studying philosophy or morals and ethics in regards to these questions? And like in that regard, like then what does a shooting star become? You know, there's no wishes to be granted on a shooting star. There's no magic in the world. Like, is there any hope left in the world? Is there any magic left in the world? Or are all those words just meaningless and superfluous to us if I become an atheist?
So I'll speak. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Yeah, it's a tough spot. You know, when you come out of religion, you lose that idea that there's some bigger force in the universe directing things, and when you lose that, it can be hard. And when you come out the other side, you realize, well, the life's only going to be what I make it, and so I have to be out there working for what I want in the world and taking care of myself, and you know, being. It sounds kind of cheesy, but being the change you want to see in the world. We definitely want to recommend you contact Recovering from Religion. They're a really great resource for people to contact and actually work through, people that are trained to help people work through any kind of cognitive issues they may be having. You know, we're not trained therapists. So, you know, you have to take our advice with a grain of salt. But my number one advice is to go find yourself another community, because a lot of times religion keeps its hooks in us because of the community the automatic community that it brings, right? You show up to church and you're instantly accepted. You instantly have friends. So I would recommend go out and try and find some other communities to be a part of.
Yeah.
Here's my take on this, Cooper, real quick, because I want to tell you something too. This idea that, I don't have this religion anymore. I need to replace this. Do I need to go to science? Do I need to read books? Do I need to listen to lectures? You don't have to do anything, right? There's no requirements to what you're doing now. You just take a deep breath and you relax for a second, because you're going through some stuff right now. This is an emotionally taxing time for you. This isn't a time for you to say, I have to get all my ducks in a row and I have to make sure I'm doing all the right atheist things so I don't lose my atheist card. If you want to pray, you pray. If you want to talk to people about it, you talk to people about it. You got to do what's best for you at this moment, and don't worry about what other people expect for you to do.
Yep.
Because this is a unique experience that you're going to look back on and realize, oh, wow, this is really stressful, because for a lot of people, they never even go through this. They don't even have this deconstruction that you're happening right now, where it feels like the ground is falling beneath you and you don't know what's solid anymore. Right.
Right.
So like, figure out your footing first, right? You got to learn to walk before you can run again, because you're entering a whole new phase of your life at this point, and things will probably be different if you're really losing it all, right? So don't worry about what you're supposed to believe or what's right or what's wrong. Just take it one day at a time, and you'll get there. It's not a race. If you enjoy listening to stuff like this, if you enjoy the philosophy and the sciences, I say go for it, but don't make it seem like it's a do or die situation, because it's really not. Anyway, go ahead, Cooper.
I would say go ahead, go be you. Go find out who you are. That's one of the things that I've been able to discover since I've left religion is, I can be whatever I want to be now. I don't have to be what the religion wants me to be. I can go and enjoy the things that I want to enjoy, and I can go see rated R movies. I can see adult themed shows, and I can watch porn, and I can masturbate, and and you get all these things that the religion didn't let you do anymore. You get to discover a whole new part of yourself.
Yeah.
Right. If I may, a couple of different things. One thing that keeps me hopeful is that once I do leave my faith behind totally, is that I'll be able to embrace the idea that religion and Christ, that I don't have to find because it's always not sat well with me when Christians say the idea like you have to find your identity is hidden, your life is hidden with God in Christ, and you have to find your identity in who Jesus is, and let Jesus live through you, that kind of thing. That seems so insulting to me. It's almost like Christ, they were saying, like, I never felt like Christ accepted my own identity.
Yeah, here's something to think about. Here's something to think about. The Apostle Paul, right, literally was involved in like the execution of Christians, right? Like maybe wasn't doing it himself, but was, holding the coats of the folks who were stoning people to death. You remember that story, right? This is a story that's told. This dude got a vision and ended up coming back to Christ. So apparently Christ thought this guy was good enough to talk to and come back into the fold. I imagine you're not as bad as the Apostle Paul, or at least the story he tells himself out to be. And God supposedly, right, if he's there, he loves us, right? The Christian God, if he's out there, if he really loves you and he wants that relationship with you, he will have it with you. Or better yet, if he doesn't and there's some bigger, grander design, I would hope that if there is a good and just God, he knows my heart and he knows my intentions and he knows what I'm about. And he knows the stuff that I'm doing right now, that's not something that he could judge me on, because he knows that I honestly and sincerely cannot find a reason to believe in him. And I think if he was just and he was honest, he would do the same for you too, Cooper. Because I think if you found a good reason to believe, you would probably keep believing it, right? It would probably be easier. But right now, it sounds like you're going through a crisis of faith. And obviously, it's a very uncomfortable position to be in, right? So if there is a God and if he's out there, I would, take that perspective into account, right? He'll find you.
I have heard that perspective before, and Aaron shared it just a moment ago on the show. If God wanted to find me, he knows where I am. He knows how to reach out to me. He knows what will get me to believe. And he's never done that. And Jesus said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. But it certainly feels as though I've been abandoned by him. What does he mean? He'll never leave me nor forsake me in the afterlife? Well, it's hard to get away from him there.
Yep.
And I would just like to get away from it all and make my own meaning in life. But I've devoted, I'm middle-aged, and I've devoted most of my life. I went to seminary, wasted 2 years of my life there, and I've devoted my whole life to the pursuit and study of religion. What do I do with the rest of it?
Yeah, well, let's talk about this. And I don't want to take up all the time. I want Aaron to jump in if he has something to say. But let's talk about let's talk about a little bit of mindfulness therapy. Let's talk about ACT, okay? When we're talking about our life experiences, our life narratives, that's a very powerful thing because it can empower us to do the things that we want to do, or it can limit us. I noticed you used the language there. Oh, I wasted 2 years at seminary, right? And there's obviously a very negative connotation there. But if we practice a little bit of reframing, and if we look at that and say, you know, you went to seminary, and yes, you don't believe in that anymore, but now you are uniquely qualified to talk about what it's like to go to seminary school. And you can talk to other people who have also gone to seminary school and are also struggling. And that is a very powerful thing. I can't do that. Right. Aaron can't do that. A lot of people can't do that. If you contact the folks at the Recovering from Religion Foundation, I guarantee you they talk to people every week from folks who are struggling in seminary school or are part of a church or some parishioner. I mean, that's a hugely powerful asset that you've gained that you couldn't have had without having that experience. So again, using these kinds of mindfulness tools, that's not something Christianity really focuses on, because Christianity wants you to have one specific thing, which is you're a sinner and you suck and you need to get right with God. But now that you're free from that, you have the ability to frame life in your own terms and choose your own purpose there and what makes sense to you and what's going to be empowering for you. Yeah,
I'm kind of excited for you because you're going to experience a sense of freedom, and the shackles are off. And and so I'm excited for you to go through that.
Yeah,
it's going to be hard. And as Dan said, don't think too negatively about your past, because those are your experiences. Those were the experiences that you had, and take the good parts from them and move forward. I was raised Mormon, and there's a lot about the Mormon church that I still like and admire. There's still a lot of their teachings that I like and admire, and I'm taking the good parts. I'm taking the parts that are for me, and moving forward, and just leaving the other stuff behind that I'm not too interested in anymore.
Right. So what can I do moving forward? Like, you and Dan have me both pumped up. Like, I'm seeing hope around the corner, but like, I'm also thinking, like, what do I do on my deathbed if I start to because I want to dive into the whole atheism and like even anti-theism, because I don't see religion as helping anybody. I only see it as a hindrance to people. Like, but then I see, what about if on my deathbed I feel a moment and twinge of fear, and then I reach out again for a God who isn't there?
Yeah. So 2 things to that. You're feeling a sense of zealotry right now. This is a phase that we often talk about in the community. We call it the angry atheist phase, right? You're mentioning your anti-religious sentiments here. And while I'm not going to stress that you don't, you don't reflect on them, I will say that this is probably also part of that phase, and is something that you will learn to normalize and integrate into your life. You're fired up right now because you're kind of realizing you've been taken advantage of, right? You've been told lies about something, and you've lived your life purposely in a way that was in concordance with those lives. So there's a sense that you want to help others from not being robbed of that, right? Of those potential experiences. There's an opportunity loss there. And that is noble, and that is great. And I encourage it. But also keep in mind that there is going to be a balance. You can only keep that energy for so long. For some people, it does last forever. But that is not the vast majority, right? I'm still here. I'm still talking about the negative effects of religion. But I've also learned to balance out my life in other ways too. So don't let these thoughts consume your every waking moment, right? Part of the opportunity you have now is you get to move on and you get to live that life. And you would be wasting it if you were living it in regret, saying, oh, I wish I could do these things and I need to stop other people because they don't get to have these things. You're worried about the deathbed scenario. The truth is, if we're gone, that's it, right? At least from our perspective. So it doesn't matter. Right. If you start praying at the end of your bed, okay. That it doesn't really matter, right? It's not like you're gonna go to a different place, So it's something that I don't think you have to worry about too much, honestly. Yeah,
and I don't, I'll admit that when times get rough, I don't necessarily pray, but I hope out to the universe that things work out, right? I'm scared of dying. I know a lot of people aren't, but I'm scared of being on my deathbed and not knowing what's coming next. I sure hope that there's something after, but evidence says there's not. But yeah, it's a scary thing to contemplate.
Yeah, but there's no shame in it.
Yeah, it's normal human to be scared of that deathbed experience.
You know, I just want to shoot out a message to your listeners, like especially your maybe listeners who are on the verge and doubting, and then the listeners who just listen to scoff and mock. Like, just keep an open mind. These guys are not just hosts for the money because they're volunteer. They are volunteers. You guys are volunteers, and you're doing this because you earnestly care. So, like, don't call in and give these guys a hard time if you're just zealot Christians who want to just give them a hard time. And if you're on the verge of leaving your faith, it's not the worst thing you can do. Like, if you die and get to a judgeful God, an eventual God, or at least a good God, just say, hey, I didn't know. What am I supposed to do?
Exactly. Those are good. Those are good words. I didn't know.
Yeah. Cooper, I am going to let you go because we are over time on this call here, but I do appreciate you calling in, and I thank you for sharing your experience with us. I hope you continue to find that peace that you're looking after. But remember, there's a lot of people. If you don't believe it, you can look in the live chat right now who are sending love your way, and who are also on your side. So happy trails to you, and good luck on your journey.
Good luck.
Normally, I try to take each call for about 10 minutes. When calls like that come in, I usually go a little longer. And it's because if you're going in a place like that, you kind of need a little bit of time to just kind of vent a little bit.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. It's a tough spot to be in. Your whole conception of what life is about and your meaning and your community and your connection, right? It's all gone out the window. It's a really hard spot to be in. So
it's a super hard spot to be in. And I appreciate folks who are being open about those experiences.
Yeah.
Especially feeling like they can be open here. That is it means a lot that you can trust us with that
appreciate
story.
The call.
Yes, thank you so much. Real quickly, I do have to talk about some of the ways you can support the ACA. We have a campaign that's going on right now that you might be interested in. So we're going to play the video for that right now.
Have you ever wanted to make a permanent impact on the Atheist Community of Austin? Help support our space for free thought by buying a custom engraved brick to be laid on the building grounds to help raise funds for improvements. Our building has stood as a beacon for years, bringing people together. But 3 years of emptiness due to the pandemic have taken a toll, leaving it in disrepair. Help us restore this hub of connection and support by buying a brick. Moses had his stone tablets, but we're doing our own version. Join our brick fundraiser and let your engraved messages stand the test of time, minus commandments. Visit tiny.cc/ACA bricks for more information.
Yeah, so think about getting a brick if you like, because that's a way you can support the ACA. Another way you can support the ACA is through super chats, and we do have a super chat that I get to read right now, because if you give a super chat, we will read them on the air. This is from Jimmy Jr., who gives $4.99 and says, Bigfoot is just an alien that was left behind, and so he built the pyramids to try and phone home, which is a very funny collage of different things there. And I like that image. So thank you, Jimmy Jr., for that image.
I think technically that would be a Yeti, since it's on the other side of the world, right? Aren't the Yetis on those continents?
Is that how that works?
Unless Bigfoot is a really good swimmer.
Is it like so is it the hemisphere, or is it just like the side of the earth that determines Bigfoot to Yeti?
I think it's the oceans.
Is it the oceans? Okay. Is it I'm not going to ask you more questions about nonsense, but that makes sense. One other thing before I keep going here, you can also support the show by becoming a member. You get emojis in the chat if you do that, and your name gets highlighted in the chat, and you'll be immune to the slow mode. You can do it for as little as 99 cents per month. So check that out if you haven't already. Okay, so I said I want to try to get to everybody. I do have a lot of calls, and we ended up taking longer than I thought on that call. Again, that is perfectly fine. I'm perfectly happy to go longer for calls like that. But I'm still gonna try to get to everybody if I can. So if that means we'll go over a little overtime today, we'll see. But from here on out, I am gonna be trying to speed things up a bit. So let's do this. Next, we're gonna talk to Baked Alaska, who's calling in from New York. Baked Alaska, you've called in before, and last time you scared me because I thought you were the infamous like Nazi guy, Baked Alaska, but you're not. You're like a different Baked Alaska, which I don't know why you keep the name, but that's your business, I guess. What's going on, Baked Alaska?
Yeah, what's up, man? Okay, so this is what I wanted to talk about. I was curious what you guys thought was maybe the top or maybe your best argument for God not existing. And the reason I ask is just because what I did, the way I basically became a theist was by looking at the arguments and the evidence on basically both sides. Like I watched a lot of debates and things like that. And I ended up just basically falling on the side that the arguments were better for God existing than the opposite. So that's why I ask. It's a constant learning process for me. So I was curious what your guys' views were.
Sure. Aaron, you want to take this first?
Yeah, I can take this first. So my argument is that there's too many gods. That if God was real, that there would be a consistent story for all of human history, from the beginning all the way down to now, a consistent message, a consistent story. But there are too many religions out there for there to be a single God that has a single message to share with us. And they all start at different periods of time, and they all end at different periods of time. That would be my best argument.
It's interesting.
Dan? Okay. Can I ask a follow-up question about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think they're man? Do you basically think they're man-made religions? The other, like the all these different religions, right?
Yeah, I take the position that religions are man-made. Yeah.
Okay. So if, like, for example, Christianity was true, why would it invalidate Christianity if other people just started making up their own religions?
It wouldn't necessarily, but the Christian religion technically started with Jesus Christ. If you look back in all the early writings, there were several different flavors of Christianity. Some of them rejected the Old Testament. Some of them accepted the New Testament and the Old Testament. Some of them mixed it and kind of remixed it and made it their own. And even Christianity, and then Christianity came out of Judaism, and even Judaism, it had a beginning. But human history was way before Judaism. If the Jewish God was real, how come he waited until 5,000 years before Jesus was born to make an appearance? Because human history, 10,000 years recorded human history, 10, 12,000 years, something like that. I mean, why did he wait 7,000 years to make an appearance?
You're saying, why did he wait? Why did God wait for Jesus, like the 5,000 years you're saying in reference to Jesus, right?
Yeah, why did he make, Christianity comes out of Judaism, so why did he wait until Moses, right? Why did to make an appearance?
Right? I mean, there's
or Abraham.
I mean, Christians have, right. I mean, I've heard like apologetic explanations for that that are based upon not in terms of the number of years, but in terms of the population of the world, and that for conditions to be ripe for Jesus's message to take hold, right? And so there was relative stability in that area of the world. Actually, only a tiny percentage of the world's population had actually existed prior to Jesus's birth, right? And so, like, so from that perspective, it's not like that. It's not really that early on in the history of humanity that Jesus came.
Let's talk about this. How old do you think humanity is?
It was very early on. I'm sorry. It was very early on.
Sorry to interrupt you, Baked Alaska. How old do you think humanity is?
I think humanity is somewhere around approximately like 500,000 to like 750,000 years old.
Yeah. Okay. So that's depending on what you mean by humans, right? Obviously, there's differences in how anthropologists talk about it. Yeah, I'd say that's at least a fair summation. You could say that's a perspective. That's a long time. I mean, even if we're talking about like, and just to bolster Aaron's point here, right? You're right in that technically, yes, population sizes are not going to be matched up with population sizes in like a post-agricultural society, right? We're talking about hunter-gatherer groups, very small, right? But we are talking about a lot of people that are unsaved. And before that, of course, if we're following a materialist understanding of history, if we're looking at the world from that perspective, we're also seeing human beings evolved, right? We're seeing human beings coming from another animal, right? And still being animals themselves. I mean, does that align in your worldview as well?
Well, I mean, I do tend to think, and there's actually been some literature out recently on this, dating Adam and Eve back to those prehistoric times. So I don't think there's really I don't think there needs to be any inconsistency with what like the science tells us and what like the Christian worldview says. I think they can line up there. But just in terms of the other point Aaron mentioned, I mean, Aaron, don't you think that the fact that so many people all over the world in all different societies like believe in God, I mean, isn't that generally evidence of something being true? I mean, do we generally desire something that doesn't exist?
I believe that I'm not sure. I don't know I'm not sure how innate a belief in God is to human beings. I'm not sure if I'm aware of any studies that would that have studied that, have come to an understanding of that. I think we're mammals, so we're emotional creatures. We have emotions, and emotions kind of rule the day as far as we're concerned. To kind of, push us to and fro with their silliness. And so I think there's probably an emotional component to wanting to believe in some higher power. Like the previous caller, there's something when things get tough and rough, that's just, I think it's normal to reach out to something, to want to feel connected to something out there to make it better, to solve the problem, to improve things. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's something out there actually listening or even capable of listening.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't necessarily. Yeah, I would agree. It doesn't necessarily mean that, but I just think that an inference could be drawn that it may, because we generally don't desire things that don't exist.
Yeah, I just kind of steer. Right? I just kind of steer away from making those. Yeah, I just kind of steer away from making those inferences, because if God really wanted to know us, He was there. He'd make it a little clearer. I think I'd want. If I was in God's position and I wanted people to know that I existed, I'd make it a little clearer and not like people depend on emotional inferences. Right.
So no, this is a good point, and I think this is actually one of the better objections. Is like divine hiddenness. Why isn't it more clear that God exists? And I think there the question is whether, for some subset of people, whether even if they were given more evidence, whether they would believe, right? Whether they would go into a saving relationship with God. So that's sort of independent, right, of what the level of evidence is. Like if you guys knew God existed, would you worship Him?
If we're talking about Yahweh, no. I don't think he would be worthy of worship. But there's different concepts of the Christian God, so it kind of depends.
Okay, so why? So let's just stick with Christianity. Why would God need to provide you more evidence if you're not going to worship Him? You're not going to go into a saving relationship with Him, right? So what would be the purpose of God providing you more evidence so you could spur Him?
Well, I mean, if He wants me to acknowledge His existence and at least consider it, He has to be there. Right? Just because I wouldn't worship Him doesn't mean other people wouldn't. I don't know why He would have to be divinely hidden from me, and also divinely hidden from those that would worship Him.
Well, but that's the issue, right? Like, because he's not divinely hidden for other sets of people. So we're just talking about the subset of people that don't believe in him, and then the question becomes, right? And
I would counter. Why is God hidden to some but not to others?
Yeah, like
that
why?
Seems weird.
Why do the Aborigines don't get to go to heaven, right? Or don't get to have a relationship with the Christian God? You know, like why is it that a particular sect of people within the Middle East, and then more broadly after that, the Western world gets to have a relationship with God, but folks in indigenous communities around the world, even post Christianity's rise as a global power, still don't have an acknowledgement that even he's a thing, right? To me, that seems strange. To me, if anything, that points to the locality of the religion, right? The locality of the phenomenon. I think that gives evidence to Christianity being a cultural tradition and a local human idea rather than a divine one.
Well, I mean, there seems to be like a tension here, because like earlier Aaron was saying, like, because there's all these different religions, that's a reason not to believe in Christianity.
Yes.
But then when we find examples of like people not having a religion, that's a reason not to believe in Christianity. Right? And so like I don't think you could, I'm not saying like you guys are doing this, but I'm just saying like I don't think you could have it both ways. Right?
Well,
like,
I think Aaron's point was there needs to be a consistency within the Christian story, right? There seems to be an inconsistency in the narrative at which Christianity portrays its origins, and specifically Judaism as well, versus what seems to be the apparent case in reality. Like you were talking about how scientists can trace ourselves back to Adam and Eve. I'm not sure about like those kinds of specific claims, but I don't think that's a view that Aaron has or that I have. I think the history that Christianity portrays itself as having doesn't necessarily line up with the historical reality. And it seems to be more of a local phenomenon. At least I don't want to put words in Aaron's mouth, but I'm assuming that's his take.
It seems most religions are local phenomenon, which would lead me to believe that there's not a universal God speaking to people universally. Yeah. Otherwise, you'd have the same God appearing in different cultures across continents, across time, and you just don't see that. You see religion starting with specific groups of people and going from there and spreading. Because if you and I were to sit down and we were to design a system, okay, we're God and we want our children to learn about us and follow us, we could come up with about 1 million different ways of doing that are better than the current way that God supposedly is using.
So you could come up with a better way that people would be able to freely choose to go into a saving relationship with God.
I think so.
And how would that be accomplished?
By sending the same message to the same places on the earth at the same time, maybe by making sure that false messages don't get spread, by actually making sure that there's no divine hiddenness, that everybody gets a message, that there's a consistent, repeatable, reliable way for everybody to come to know that God exists and is real, instead of having a certain select group of people that get to have those experiences and other people that don't get to have those experiences. And then people can choose for themselves whether they want to enter into that relationship or not. And there's no proof. There's high suggestions of it because of all these, unique things that are happening at the same time across the world. But there's no, that's off the top of my head.
Right. Well, I think some of those things that you mentioned, at least, are consequences of free will and people choosing to go their own path, right? So there's nothing like God can't make people freely do things.
Oh no, yeah, I totally agree with that.
So I think that's part of it, but So, but besides like divine hiddenness and the other thing we mentioned, like, is there any other compelling, objectively, Dan, why did you say you wouldn't worship God even if you knew he existed?
Well, first, let me say, when it comes to the free will thing, right? Yes, you could argue that a free will component is there. Let's say, for the sake of argument, free will is a thing, right? The choice still has to be there. The choice isn't there for me right now. I can't even choose to have a relationship with God if I don't think he's real, right? It's kind of like, can I choose to believe the earth is flat? I don't know. I don't know if I'm kind of compelled to believe that the earth isn't, because I have an understanding of evidence. I have an understanding of science. I have an understanding of philosophy. I have an understanding of a lot of subjects that like prevent me from having that belief. I could like, if I said that the earth was flat, I'd be pretending. It wouldn't be true to my beliefs. So I would not want to pretend with a God belief either, even if I thought it was the right thing to do. I want to be something that I have a genuine belief in. So I'll start with that first. But when talking about not worshiping him, I choose the position as an atheist to mean that I don't know what a God is until somebody defines it for me, right? I can't evaluate the God claim until somebody gives me a God claim to work with. So if you say God is just nature, okay, yeah, I believe in nature. I guess that means I believe in God, right? We have a tendency in philosophy, particularly Western philosophy, to talk about the Christian God. And I think that that is a sort of leftover from, a history of Christianity, like being so inundated with philosophical literature, like just in part of the culture, that it's kind of a holdout from that. And so to be fair to other God claims, I have to be like, well, I have to evaluate it first. But if we're talking about the Christian God and why I wouldn't worship him, the classical Christian God seems to me to violate every intuition I have about what is right and what is wrong. Now, maybe I don't know what right and wrong is. Maybe it's just my human concepts, and maybe it has no meaning. But if I were to be a judge, or if I were to have some understanding, some semblance of what right and wrong is, I can't, again, choose that, right? It's something that I just believe or I don't believe. And I do have a sense of what is right and wrong. And I think the Christian God has violated that on many, many different accounts, both Old and New Testament versions of that God. So because of that violation, I don't think he's worthy of worship. I'm not sure if there's a being that's like worthy of worship anyway. I think the concept of worship is kind of weird in itself. But I would at least not follow their tenets, right? I don't think the Christian formula is a good recipe to make a good person. In other words, I think it can lead you to problematic ideas. So that's why I wouldn't follow him.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, if for the sake of argument, like that not only was it like established that God existed, but the Christian God existed in terms of like, which the concept obviously of the Christian God is like that God is all good, right? If you knew that God was all good, would you worship him then?
If I knew that God was all good, then I must have a different understanding of what good is than what I understand it to be now.
Yeah. God would have some explaining to do.
So it's kind of difficult for me to say. It's kind of like saying what would water do in the universe where physics is different? It's like, I don't know. I'm not there. You know what I mean? I'm in this universe.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at. Do you think it's possible that something's gotten lost? Like, could something be lost in translation? Right? Like, if, for example, God exists and he is all good, and we just take that like as a presupposition, then something's gotten lost in translation, like either in the way things were written in the Old Testament or the New Testament, right? If he was all good, do you think then that
if he was all good, then the Bible is not a reliable account of who God is. And so in that sense, I really don't know who God is then.
Yeah.
Let's assume the Bible's not correct. but you know that there's a supreme being that created the universe, and he's perfect and he's all good, morally speaking. Would you worship in them?
Yeah, maybe. But would I even be a Christian at that point?
Okay.
Because like if we're saying the Bible is straight up wrong, I don't know what that says about the Jesus narrative. I don't know what that says about a lot of Christian theology, right? So I may not even be a Christian at that point. I may be something else. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that what we think, right? There's a book called "Is God a Moral Monster?" Right? Because a lot of the things in the Old Testament, like, raise these questions, like they do. I mean, Christians have struggled with these issues for centuries. So I don't think there's really that much of a difference between us, because, like, I'm sure the things that you find objectionable, like morally, like I do as well. I'm sure our morals are very probably 99% or I shouldn't say 99, but like 90% aligned, right? So there has to be something that's like, I guess what I'm saying is like there's explanation.
What we have in common, you mean?
Like, yeah, like I'm sure you seem like a good guy. Obviously, we don't know each other. We've never met or anything. We don't, but like I'm
appreciate
sure
that.
like you're a good person. Yeah, and so like I don't think like the things that bother you that are in the Bible, like they would bother me too, right?
Yes.
If they cannot be explained, if there's no way of
yes,
contextualizing them, and yeah. So
well, our explanations will be different though. Here's my take on this, Baked Glass. Sorry to interrupt you because I don't mean to cut you short. We have a bunch of calls here, but here's the thing, right? In my point of view, the reason why I think you and I might share a lot of moral intuitions is because we both grew up in 21st century America, right? I think like we have a lot of secular values that we probably have in common. And I think our perspectives are probably going to be different if we grew up in a different time and place, right? Same thing with our objections to the Bible. If you're able to find something that gives you peace with your interpretation of the Bible, more power to you. But my interpretation and explanation is that this is made up by people, and that's what gives me peace about it, right? I don't have to say, well, I think maybe there's a mistranslation here, or maybe the message isn't getting through, or maybe the Bible isn't just an accurate depiction, or maybe I'm not getting the right understanding of what's going on. I can just rest happy and say, yeah, I think it was all made up from the beginning. And so there's going to be a difference there in how we have that understanding. I don't need the Bible to have an understanding of morality, thankfully. And I don't think you do too, either, for the record. I don't think any Christian does.
Yeah.
But I don't have to rely on the Bible for anything, honestly, other than what the Bible says, which is also weird because there's different understandings of what even that is. So I don't know. But I'll let you say some final thoughts before we let you go.
Yeah. Sure, and I enjoyed the conversation as always. I mean, I guess I would just leave you and the listeners with that reference to that book, "Is God a Moral Monster?" I think it was written by Paul Copan, because I feel like we all are kind of on the search for truth, and we have to keep an open mind. And a lot of the objections that we have, there are answers to the objections. We may not find them convincing, but a lot of times people don't even know they're out there, right? And they just hear things, and they're not inclined to like take the step to be like, am I, to falsify their own views. Like, I think you have to proactively try to falsify your own views. That was what prompted me to call in and ask you guys for your, arguments against God existing, et cetera. But of course, we're all biased, and that's the challenge, right? Like, we all have a sort of a position established of sorts, and I think you can change it. I mean, ultimately, I think you can. I've heard people say, like, you don't choose your beliefs. I think you kind of do, though, in a way, based upon like how open you are to changing them. So unless you guys had anything else, I could leave you and go back to the wonderful chat.
Sounds good, Baked Alaska. I do appreciate you calling in. Tell you what, I will check out the book. I see it's on Amazon. I'll give it a look through, and then maybe next time you call in, I can have a more informed opinion about what I think about it. So we can go from there. Sound good?
Awesome.
Oh, and I think he's got. Oh, There he is. Okay, there you go, Baked Alaska. I'll see you next time. Yeah, what'd you think of that call, Aaron?
I thought that was a really good call. Good questions and good back and forth. Yeah.
Baked Alaska's called him before.
Yeah, recognize his voice from the
every host have different ideas about Baked Alaska's takes on things. I appreciate his willingness to call into the show and share his point of view. I obviously disagree. I won't harp on that too much. And I will check out the book. But even if I was able to justify a lot of the moral atrocities, which I consider to be true still of the Bible, that's still a different question of whether God exists as well, right?
Yeah. I know he wanted us to just to accept that God is good. Okay, we'll grant you that, but I actually can't do that in reality, because I think any hidden God is by definition not a good God.
Yeah, there is something to be said about that too. And I will read the book and I will see, it's not my first rodeo with apologetics, but it is a separate question entirely as to whether or not he still exists. I mean, I can still find justifications. We can write a story about a perfect God. It doesn't mean that he's real, right? That's still a whole different question. But I do want to be familiar with what's out there. So I'll take a look at it. But man, I have so many calls here, Aaron, and I said I was going to try to get to all of them. and that one also went a little long, and it's like, oh my gosh, so many things happening here. So I will do this plug really, really quick. We have a limited edition t-shirt every month. As you know, if you want to check out what's there this month, you should go to tiny.cc/merchaca. If you look on the screen in just a second, it'll be there. We've got, if the earth was really flat, how does it wear its pants? I don't know. How does it wear its pants?
It keeps me up at night.
It keeps me up at night too. This is going to be in the store for one more day, tomorrow. And then we got a new shirt next month, which I'm really excited about. But check out all the merch that we have on there as well.
Hopefully it's the J Mike double face palm.
We should have a J Mike shirt. I'd wear a shirt with J Mike's face on it. That'd be pretty funny. And really quickly as well, I need to talk about if you want to listen to our audio only shows, you can go to tiny.cc/AEN podcasts for all the latest ACA shows. Sorry for the audio listeners, because we did do a picture caption this week. But again,
shout out to all my podcast listeners. I'm a podcast listener too. So
shout out to the podcast listeners. That you're a real one. Okay. You're a real one. But we have a bunch of people who still want to talk to us. So let's keep this train moving.
Let's do it.
We have a couple different people who want to talk to us, but we're going to talk to R, who is calling from unknown. R, you are live on Truth Wandered. What's up?
Bear with me. I'm just eating some plant-based beefless bulgogi. And I know you're a vegan also.
Hell yeah. Rocket.
And by the way, regarding... Excellent. I want to call in on a Sunday when Richard Gilliver is there, because I want to refute his and rebut his take on veganism, but that's another thing.
Listen. I know Richard's take on veganism is bad. Okay. All right. Listen, all the vegans, we all know this in our hearts. One day I will champion you. I will. But today is not that day. We fight to live another day. Anyway.
I know it not just in my heart, but in my head. I have logical arguments for it, but that's another call. And by the way, Baked Alaska's claim that we choose our beliefs, I choose to believe he's wrong.
That's a hot take. I agree. I think that's a hot take. But no, he's not here to defend himself. So we'll leave it to the next time we talk to him. But what do you got for us today?
Sure. Okay. So I want to express some skepticism that Newton and other scientists of his age may not actually have been theists. And I'll tell you why. And I'm not making the claim that he was an atheist, but he was a genius, and he knew what the consequences would be if he were publicly atheist, which usually involved some form of being tortured to death. He knew what Galileo before him went through just for postulating a heliocentric solar system without even declaring atheism. And to compare, I live in a deep blue state in what's supposed to be a secular democracy Yet even I don't want to give my name and location on an internet show out of a realistic concern that I might not be employed as a school teacher.
That's fair.
And I'm not asserting that he was an atheist. And that's why I'm giving my initial as R. Okay. I'm not saying that Newton and others of his age were atheists, because that would be an unfalsifiable claim. But I think when people say that he was a theist, let alone a Christian, I think it ought to be viewed with a healthy dose of skepticism, given what the consequences would be if he had not claimed to be Christian. And I wonder what your take is on this.
I actually disagree with you, but specifically about Newton, because Newton was wild. First of all, my headcanon, Newton, probably autistic, and I don't mean that as a joke. I think I think a lot of people have postulated that he had very particularly fine and narrow interests. One of those being he would literally like cut out pieces of the Bible that he thought were like interesting and would try to discover like hidden messages and stuff within that. I just don't think that's something an atheist would do.
Yeah, I read a bio of Newton. So, but you know, if you're going to pretend to be something, go all the way.
Yeah. Well, I think I don't know if he has to pretend.
That's a pretty high level. That's a pretty high commitment.
Yeah, I think Newton in particular has written enough about Christianity, kind of like Spinoza. Like Spinoza, same thing. I feel like when we're talking about oh my God, I'm forgetting my famous white people that contributed to good things in Western civilization. But like Newton in particular was really weird about his religion, because, and this is a fun fact I know about Newton, he didn't believe in the Trinity. He like had his own beliefs. And I know this because every time you read a biography about Newton, they like vaguely describe him as a deist, because his beliefs were just so like non-standard that it's hard to kind of put him in one box. But I bring up like his possible autism diagnosis or whatever, because like I think one, he didn't feel the need to fit into the norm. And I think he just like everything you know about Newton's life, he was just kind of doing his own thing. I don't think Newton would have had a problem of saying, yeah, I don't believe in this. I think he would have just said it, honestly. But I didn't know the guy. All I know is just reading about him. If there's one thing that's true about Newton, is that he was definitely a genius. He definitely had a lot of thoughts about a lot of stuff. And he had a lot of thoughts about Christianity. And to my knowledge, he has never actually said he doesn't believe that Christianity is true. If anything, I think he said the opposite. I think if you didn't really believe it in your heart, you'd probably be silent on the subject. I imagine you wouldn't write so much as he did about it. So he's a weird guy, but I don't know. That's my take. What do you think, Aaron?
I don't know much about Newton. I know Apple named a device after him, I think, and there are units of force named after him.
Yeah.
And he laid the foundations for modern day, I don't know, physics, astrophysics, cosmology. I'm not sure what the field of study but his laws of motion and all that, pretty genius things. And then he got really interested in light for a while. And then I guess toward the end of his life, he got obsessed with alchemy and trying to change things, to like lead into gold and things like that. But I kind of think people are at the fundamental lazy. And so I don't think people would go to too much trouble to try and deceive everybody, to actively deceive people that you're Christian. I think you just wouldn't say anything. I think that's the more likely course of action for someone to take. If they're pretending, if they're trying to hide their atheism, it's just not to say anything. And then, keep going to church and keep saying that you believe, but not, cutting things out of your Bible and
some private writings. If you're as a prolific a writer, right? Because like we know, like Abraham Lincoln had doubts, for example, and we know this because we have those private writings. I don't think there's any evidence of that for Newton, but I'm not an expert. I could be wrong.
What do you say to that, R?
Well, go ahead.
No, I was turning the time over to you.
Yeah, what do you think?
Okay, well, when you make those, when you say that about Newton in particular, I think those are actually rather convincing arguments. So
okay.
I have to bow to your arguments on Newton, not necessarily about other great thinkers of his age, particularly scientists.
Yeah, that might be true. That might be true. But there's a very famous painting of Newton by William Blake. And if you've ever seen this painting, it's this weird sort of thing. Newton's kind of sitting down in this chair, and there's these kind of fantastical things happening around him, but he's looking at this sort of paper, and he's doing math and stuff on it. And so the idea behind this painting, that this critique almost of William Blake is making, is that with such a brilliant mind, he was super focused. He was very much paying attention to the things that was right in front of him, and maybe not even seeing all the crazy stuff that was happening around him. I think that's true to Newton's life. And I think if he had any sort of thing against Christianity, I think there would be more evidence of it than what currently exists. But that's my Newton facts. I don't know.
Newton facts.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, towards the end of his life, he was the master of the Royal Mint. I didn't know if you knew that.
No,
he had a government bureaucracy job. Yeah. On the last thing, real quick.
Real quick.
Of being a teacher, I once taught in a school district where signs were required to be posted in every classroom and every room in the school district that said, "In God We Trust."
Mm-hmm.
And I got around that by posting the sign on the bulletin board, but with the blank side facing outward.
Nice. Yeah.
So it just looks like a blank
civil disobedience there.
Civil disobedience.
Yeah. Well,
rebel against the system.
I followed the rule. I followed the rule that didn't say what side the sign had to be facing. All right. I'll let you go because I know you got a zillion other people.
Yes, we do. Thank you, R. Thank you for respecting our time on that. We do appreciate it. Real quick, since I do want to talk to at least one or two other people. Crew is good to go overtime. Awesome. Okay, we're going to go a little bit overtime here. I want to let you guys know, if you're going to be in the Austin area on October 29th, 2023, you should come for the live broadcasting of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. Doors open at noon, and we hope to see you there. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. What about Truth Wanted? Because, guys, spooky season is coming up. And as of yet, I have no Halloween announcements. As of yet. That might change next week or later. We'll see. But as of yet, well, I'm not making any announcements as what we're doing for this year.
Any word from Rob Boss? He might make an appearance?
Keeping my lips sealed. Okay.
All right.
Leaving it at that. My cousin Rob Boss, we'll see if he can make it. But
and if my lips sealed. We're going over time, so if I suddenly turn into a pumpkin, I apologize in advance.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that warning ahead of time. We're going to talk to Sumartono. Please correct me if I'm saying your name wrong. From Indonesia. Sumartono, is that how you say your name? Please.
Yes, that is exactly how my name is pronounced.
Hell yes. I got it right first time. Sumartono, what's going on?
Yeah, I'm a deist, D, as in a dog. And I think consciousness is entirely material. Hence, all our decisions, opinions, attitudes, ideologies are dictated by the biological machinations that is explained in neuroscience. Hence, no one has any agency over whether they wish to be saved or not, like most theists claim. And people back then were okay with misogyny, racism, slavery, sexual slavery, judicial duels, capital punishment. Does that mean that most people back then were not good people? No, but simply they were more people who carried the genes of authoritarianism, submissiveness, etc. So we never had any moral revolution per se, but simply those with biological predisposition towards individualism and personal liberty have gained in quantitative dominance that slavery is now criminalized and frowned upon. So are we morally superior? Can atheists claim moral superiority over, say, the Bible, fundamental Christians, whom are famous for promoting slavery, that kind of stuff? no, there is no morality. It's just different breeds of people, much like there are different species or different planets. That's why it's been thousands of years, and yet wickedness, if you can call it that, still exists. That's what I think. It is something that stems from hard determinism.
Okay, interesting. A lot of thoughts there. There's a couple different routes we could go with this. When we talk about morality, we could start there. I don't know, Aaron, is there some way you want to start in particular? Because there's a couple different ways we can go with this conversation.
No, talking about morality sounds fine. Yeah.
Morality, and then maybe we'll talk about dualism, because I think it sounds like you have a dualist point of view of consciousness in the mind, which is interesting as well. But the morality thing is interesting, and I want to talk about it because Baked Elastic kind of brought this up too. We kind of have this idea almost like there is a sense of moral progress that sometimes people refer to. And some people cite this as evidence of some kind of objective morality. They say, well, if history seems to progress, if we seem to say, oh, well, the things we did yesterday were bad, and we continue to sort of grow in understanding of what it means for things to be bad or good, then we must be reaching some sort of objective, some sort of goal. This is an interesting idea. I think if you were to argue for an objective morality, I think this would be strong evidence for that case. And if I was making that case, I would cite that first. I used to think that this was convincing as well, but I think I'm agreeing with you in this, Supertono, is that I think morality is a human construct. I think it does come from people's sense of values, and that comes from their cultures, from their sense of time and place. And also their sense of how they reason, because I also think people's sense of reason and rationality change over time as well. So does that mean there's a convergence on a culture? Are we, if we're all able to reason, doesn't that mean that there's something objective? I'm not necessarily convinced that that's the case either. I think that even in our reasoning, we still have emotional, harbors that we fall back on. We sort of post-rationalize a lot of things that we do. So I do think it's kind of more tied to a time and place, even more than it is to some, morality that's outside of ourselves. I think we learn to grow and advance and learn and educate ourselves, and that's going to inform us. But if I didn't have the same values that I do, I would have a different sense of morality. And I think that is ultimately going to be what determines what I think is good and bad, what I value and what I don't. What do you think? Agree, disagree?
Yeah, I think it's all a human construct. That's what I've been saying. And I think if there is such thing as God, he never really made such thing as morality. And, it's very much different from the regular theistic claim that there is a moral interventionist God who dictates this and that when it comes to human morality, but I don't think there is such thing as that. It's all constructed by the people of, in the early days, but they were pretty much still made by humans, and God themselves never intended there is a one moral code for human beings. He simply told there was no such thing.
Yeah, I agree. It's a human construct, and you can just look at if there was a really an absolute objective morality that God was dictating, then that would have been announced first thing, and we wouldn't have all the changes in our morality that you can see in the Bible, and between the Old and the New Testaments, and between early church and current churches and current beliefs and current morality. It wouldn't be changing. There'd be some beginning absolute standard that we could point to. And we can't do that.
Yeah, I agree. 100% agree with that. I think we're all on the same page here, Sumartono. So there you go. Now the deism thing, that is interesting. What makes you a deist rather than, say, an atheist or a theist?
Well, that's the thing. I used to be an atheist. Well, I was a Muslim from 15 years. I'm sorry. I was a Muslim from where I was born, and then by the age of 15, I grew out of it because of, I was inquisitive and I had access to information, thankfully. And then I realized, I'm now 25, I realized that maybe a deistic God is in order. I am still an agnostic in this, in that I don't claim, I'm not certain in anything. My reasoning is this: if you were to take a computer from the modern day, just your average desktop PC, time travel that thing back into the past, say the 1900s, right? And would the clever, smartest scientists at that time be able to make sense and understand what it is? Well, I don't think they would. They would see it's a giant, big, ugly box, and they can't really make sense of, because the idea of electricity hasn't been a thing yet, and let alone all the different algorithms and computer science that happens in a computer. And God is like infinitely more complex than a computer. So I don't think even the smartest civilized, advanced civilization that could ever exist may be able to understand God the same way those 1900 scientists would not be able to understand something from the 2000 from the future.
Okay. Can I interrupt you? Can I ask you, how do you know that there is a God to understand?
Well, I don't proclaim that there is a God. I am open to the idea there is a God, because by design, God is this unprovable, and God is this complex, infinitely complex machine that human beings will not be able to sense, detect, identify, or make sense of. We cannot study God the same way we can study grass or erosion or whatever. So by design, God is not supposed to be understandable. And if God is that powerful, then he has all the might, all the powers to erase his trace, hide himself behind all the curtains he wants, because he is God. That is what he is by design. And we can't do anything about that.
I think that's an interesting idea, but let me posit something for you. I am not an expert at math by any means, but I do know a few things, right? I can know how to add, I know how to subtract, I know how to multiply, I know how to divide. And from my understanding, what people who are smarter than me say is that pretty much all the rest of math, like the most advanced stuff that you see when you get into calculus, when you get into trigonometry, when you get into 4D shapes, when you get into all the stuff and beyond, it's just more complicated variations of those simple things, right? It's just like those simple things kind of done multiple times in different ways and in different orders, right? So my point with this being, is it possible that if there is a God, or if there's something that started us, maybe they could be simple? Maybe that's something that's simple that can make something complex, and it doesn't have to be that something infinitely complex makes the rest of us.
Well, yeah, I don't know, but I've always believed God to be this really complex. I mean, after all, the universe is complex, right? And how can something so simple make something so complex? If God were to make the universe, and he has to understand the complexity, the real complexity of the universe, which we humans can't even begin to grasp.
Here's my point. Is understanding necessary for the creation of the universe?
Well, I believe, yeah. I mean, even God has to understand it. So that's why I thought God has to be much more complicated than universe.
Maybe, but like, let's think about this, right? If we're talking about like Jupiter, right? From my point of view, I don't think any knowledge or wisdom or intuition is required for Jupiter to exist. I think there has to be some physical laws that happen, right? I think like gravity has to be a thing, and I think time has to take place for all the rocks to come around the sun and the solar system. But I don't think there needs to be any intent. I don't think there needs to be any, like, anything complex necessarily. Just a couple rules of physics to follow, right?
Yeah, we kind of. I might take issue. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a cosmologist. But I kind of take issue maybe that the universe is really complex, because it seems to follow some simple rules.
Yeah.
But complexity can be kind of relative as well, and I'm kind of taking issue with your definition of God, because you've kind of defined a God that's so complex that we can't understand a God, and yet you understand that this God is really complex. So your reasoning seems kind of circular.
Well, yeah, I guess so. That's what I can't really believe. I'm not really certain whether there is God or not. But you mentioned those laws of physics, gravity, all of those laws that exist. I believe in the watchmaker's analogy. So all of those laws of physics, it's the work of God, right? So all of the things that exist now is because God wrote those laws of physics. And for that to be a thing, he must be much more advanced for reality to exist, for it to be a coherent system, not a self-destructing one. It's for it to be able to exist simply, he has to understand all these intricacies in physics, right? And for humans, that's really hard. And for God, he must be really, he must.
I'm going to ask you one more question. I want to give you one more challenge, and then I do have to let you go because we do have some other people on the line. But one more thing, if that's okay with you. We were talking about the watchmaker's analogy. It's an interesting analogy. And I think it fails in some regard. And tell me what you think about this objection I have to the watchmaker's analogy. The watchmaker's analogy, I think, works because we're able to see a watch and we're able to see the mechanics of it, right? And we understand that watches are made by humans and stuff, right? So when we look at a watch and we compare it to nature as like a background, we can see the differences there, right? Because nature doesn't function like watches do. We don't find watches growing out of trees or swimming in rivers, right? The problem with the watchmaker's analogy, though, is that if we're talking about nature as being designed, well, we can't compare nature to nature, right? Nature isn't the background that we're measuring it against, right? So how can we tell that nature was designed? What metric can we use?
Well, I guess it's just nature is designed because otherwise it wouldn't exist. Because
Can something exist without being designed? Maybe.
No, of course not.
It can't? Why not?
I wouldn't say I'm certain about that, but it's more likely that for something to work, right? For an operating system to work on a computer, we have going into panicking. We are being failure at any point. It has to be designed, right? A computer.
Well, computers, sure, but I'm just talking about nature, right?
Yeah. So the only way to know if something is designed or not.
The very fabric of reality. If it is designed, then it might not even work. Like a computer that fails to boot up.
Yeah, we only have one universe to observe, so we don't know if it's designed or not because we have nothing to compare it to. Right? Yeah. We know a watch is designed because we've seen other watches. We can go into a watch factory, go to a watchmaker's shop, and see them working on watches and know, this is built. We can look at the pieces being manufactured, but we only have this one universe to see. If we had access to 2, 10, a dozen, 2 dozen universes, and maybe the laws of physics are different in each one, and maybe this is the only one where life could exist. Okay, maybe you might have an argument, but we don't. There's only one universe. We can't state that the universe is designed or not. The universe just is. It just exists, and we can't really say where it came from.
Well, I guess so. I thought alter between atheism and deism is kind of absurd, really. Maybe that has to do with my upbringing. Like I was raised in a very Islamic family, so there is still residual beliefs in me that I refuse to let go, like the fact that a universe cannot exist from nothing, and so that's why that's why I grafted toward deism right now. It's because of those residual values that were implanted to me. Yeah,
could be, or there could be good arguments for deism too, right? But if we look at our arguments and we find maybe this isn't as strong as I thought, the honest thing is to maybe shed those beliefs, right? Maybe re-examine it. And I'm not saying that what your beliefs are right or wrong, but I do have objections and I do have reasons why I don't have that view. And I've shared that and Aaron has shared that. So hopefully that's been enlightening for you, or at least entertaining for you, at the very least. Supertoner, thank you so much for your call and talking to us with your perspective. I do appreciate that. And I think you might be the first person we've had call in from Indonesia. I could be wrong, but that's really cool. I like that. I don't know what time it is over there, but probably way late or way early. It's never, in between, it seems, from that side of the world. But we're running really, really late on time. This is a super long episode, but Aaron, there's like one more call I want to get to.
Let's do it.
Someone who's been waiting for a while, and I know there's other folks who are waiting, and I'm so sorry. But this one's very interesting. I don't think we've talked about this topic on the show, so I want to make it in and sneak it in really, really quick. I got Steven calling in from Mississippi. Steven, I know you've been waiting for a while here, but I'm getting you in right at the end of the show. What do you got for us?
Hey, fantastically, Dan. Glad you saved the best for last, my brother.
That's right.
Aaron, too.
Please don't prove me wrong on that, Steven.
So, I mean, I've been digging down a rabbit hole, and I don't know how I can make this a fast call. It's a super interesting topic for me. But I've been an atheist in Mississippi for the last 10 years, and I have been listening and watching to Uncharted X YouTube videos about Egypt. And there are some things out there that really are blowing my mind. There are, the scoop marks around the unfinished obelisk. There are the fact that they're lifting stones that are incredibly heavy. I'm a crane operator, so, I know what it takes to lift 1 million pounds, and they could not have done that, and yet they did over and over again. So, all of that fascinates me. I love how, I don't know how they could have done it. My idea maybe is that maybe the moon was closer, maybe like 250,000 years ago. Gravity was different. Maybe, I don't know. But what I asked you guys about in the call screener was the schist disc. And if you Googled it, SHIST disc, it's quite fascinating. If you look at this stone, it looks like a piece of machinery. It is incredibly thinly carved. The way they design it is perfectly symmetrical. It looks like something you couldn't have built today. I don't think anybody can build it today. It'd be hard to build it out of steel. Maybe I'm seeing the printer.
Let's talk about this real quick. First of all, wait, I just want to correct yourself. Did you say 250,000 years ago, or did I mishear you there?
I'm just guessing. Who knows when Atlantis and all that stuff happened? Yeah, do you really think we only went back 100,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago? I don't
think the Egyptians went back that far.
Back a lot.
I don't think. I think humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, but in hunter-gatherer societies, I think Egyptians are one of the oldest civilizations that we have evidence of, but it definitely doesn't go back that far. And even as far back as it does go, I don't think it goes far enough to know that the moon was different enough to affect gravity on Earth. I don't know about that.
You don't think it's possible that the Egyptians just acquired or inherited some structures? Like a lot of these stones that just fit way too good. They're just perfectly fit around corners.
Are you claiming that this technology means that the ancient pyramids were built by non-humans? Is that what you're claiming?
Yeah, inherited by aliens, like on Earth.
Okay. Because it seems I don't know. Because I pulled up a picture of this schist disc.
It is interesting.
Say that 20 times fast, and it looks like it's made out of stone. If aliens were here, why would they make it out of stone? Why wouldn't it be made out of metal or some of the more durable?
I also want to note that the first image that comes up on Google is a reproduction. It isn't the real one. So
I'm on this ancientpages.com website. It's got pictures of it in a museum.
So if you were to have something built out of metal or wood, it would not have lasted that long. The stone is all we have from that time period. And I think that the Egyptians actually acquired technology and they took stuff from later generations. So I think that it's possible that human civilization or something, I mean, who knows, maybe Neanderthals or something, that was building things way before we think they did. But I mean, look at the unfinished obelisk. They have the scoop marks underneath it. They're perfectly straight line scoop marks. The Serapeum with these giant sarcophaguses underground that are so heavy, it would take a team of 200, 250 people to move them if you were lucky. But there's not enough oxygen down there. They would have died. There's no way to move them. There's no physical way to move some of this stuff. There's no way that we could do that today.
So
I'm gonna call skeptic. I'm not sure I quite believe
there's a lot to go on here. Can we talk about Atlantis real quick? Because you mentioned Atlantis. Are we saying the aliens made Atlantis, or ancient humans were in Atlantis and then they just went to Egypt? Can we talk about that? Because that sounded fun.
I've been thinking about this for over 2 years, and it's a fun rabbit hole to go down. But let's just say Atlantis was Antarctica. It's the only continent on our planet that connects all of the continents. It connects Africa, South America. It's centered. And we can't study it because it's under ice and it's all these rules against it. But how do we know once all the ice thaws with global warming and whatnot that we find out that there actually are pyramids and all kinds of stuff under Antarctica? I mean,
how do we know that
a lot of
there are there now? What would make me believe that there's pyramids in Antarctica right now? Like, why would I believe that?
Well, you really can't. I mean, just like any religion, it's a belief, you know. But I mean,
well, sure, I'm assuming you believe that, right? Like, I think that's your speculation. Like, so why do you speculate that that's true?
I am speculating 100%. I don't know that it's a full belief, but I am very much speculating that it's possible, and it's because of ancient high technology, like the shift stick, like the scoop marks, like the Serapeums, and these stones all across the planet that are put together. Say you have a stone wall that's built perfectly with no mortar. These stones are laid absolutely perfectly, and they have these weird angles. Sometimes they go around corners. Sometimes they're it's odd cuts. And it seems like if you were to design a block, you would just do squares. That's, the logical solution. But they didn't do that. It almost seems like it was easy for them to move these or mold them or cast them, whatever they did. I'm not
sure I buy the movie, because if I put my car neutral on level ground, it weighs 2,000 pounds and I can push it because it's on wheels. So
yeah,
I think a bunch of people can get together and move heavy objects. I mean, I've seen groups of people lift cars, like 4 or 5 people can lift a car together. So
pounds.
a million pounds.
The obelisk is a million pounds, maybe 2 million. I don't know about the math on it. It's very heavy. And I'm a crane operator. I know what it takes to move something like that. And you're talking about not just moving, you're talking about transporting it thousands of miles. They have to lift it up out of the quarry and run it over rough terrain, and then eventually they have to stand it up.
Yeah, I'd have to check on the story on all that.
Oh yeah, Uncharted X.
See how they moved it and pulled it up.
To promote some other channel, but holy
and who is
cow.
And what's Uncharted X's background? Or do they study this stuff, or are they just somebody online? Or because I'd like to go to someone who's actually studied ancient Egypt, and knows, and spent their life studying it and looked at what other people have done. And who's this person on YouTube?
I would say that it's as close to a study as you can get. I mean, heck, it's more realistic study than most Christians will offer you. But if you watch some of his videos, I think your mind will be blown, as mine has. I can go on about this stuff.
I'm pretty sure my mind would be blown, but I'm also pretty sure that the video is just gonna be claim after claim after claim after claim after claim, with no evidence to back it up. I could be wrong, but you're making a lot of claims about all this unique, cool stuff that Egypt couldn't have done.
3D
but there's
not of a vase.
doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence to support your claims?
I mean, I believe that there is a lot of evidence to it. I can't say it's enough evidence for me to say it's a fact. I think we need to study it a lot more. But I think that a lot of people have been ignoring and shutting down this on a religious basis. We feel like, humans have only been around in a civilized fashion for 10, 20,000 years. I feel like we've gone back much further than that.
Let's think about this.
We have
I want to say something real quick, Dan. I'm pretty sure if somebody could prove that the ancient Egyptians were using technology that they shouldn't have been using, no matter what the religion is. First of all, there's probably at least one person who doesn't care, regardless of their religion. But even if they were, that's a pretty big scoop. That's a pretty big story that somebody would have to want to sit on. And I just can't believe that there's not one person to study this stuff that wouldn't want to be famous for knowing this stuff, and discovering it. Dan?
There's a lot to say about this. We have to understand that our current understanding of human history is revolutionary, right? There's already people that don't accept that narrative. The idea that human beings have been around for hundreds of thousands of years and not just a few thousand, like that was already revolutionary in its field. There's also lots of controversial theories in anthropology about human origins that exist already. About aquatic ape hypothesis. I mean, that's by like real reputable people posting some of that stuff out there, which is pretty wild. But the thing about ancient Egyptian construction techniques and other kinds of ancient civilizations building processes, there's a particular narrative that gets spun about these. In the one narrative being, there's this other story that's being told here that's being repressed, and the mainstream doesn't want to hear about this. May I suggest to you that there is perhaps another story as to why that narrative exists? And I'm going to point you to a man called Eric von Däniken. Eric von Däniken.
Oh yeah.
Däniken. You know of him. Wrote a book called Chariot of the Gods, right? Still goes on History Channel, I'm pretty sure. Like, talks about ancient alien stuff. I mean, he's the godfather of a lot of this stuff, right? These ideas that the ancient aliens actually knew about, the ancient Egyptians knew about aliens and stuff, and they helped do these things. And how can these cultures, build this stuff? It doesn't make sense. There is a lot about Egyptian architecture in particular that we don't have the exact understanding of their construction techniques, etc. And that is absolutely true. But to posit that it has to be extraterrestrial in origin, I would say is just as problematic as any religious assertion, right? I mean, what are we saying that there's another grand conspiracy here of aliens meeting with certain people at certain times and don't meet with the rest of us?
Why would
I would posit that.
How many times?
Go ahead.
How many times has Christianity or the victors of any war destroyed the evidence of any past civilization? Just look at what we did to the Native Americans. We destroyed all of their history. I mean,
this is true.
Eric von Däniken talks about the going in, say, South Carolina. They have the teardrop-shaped lakes in South Carolina that look like an asteroid impact 10,600 years ago at the Younger Dryas period, where we're talking about North America was an ice sheet. It was a 2-mile thick ice sheet, and they say that an asteroid impacted North America and caused a flash flood, which melted all of the ice, and that is where you get the biblical flood stories, because 2 miles thick of ice melted in the matter of 100 years.
We're talking about something else entirely, right? I mean, these are other ideas about human history. But just going back to Eric von Däniken, right? Eric von Däniken did not get his information from going to Egypt and studying the culture and working with Egyptologists. He literally wrote one of his books in prison. The dude is has been charged with embezzlement and stuff, right? Like, this is a dude that just wrote a story about a possibility.
Yeah.
His idea of this being all true has just as much basis as any religious phenomenon. It's just a story, an interpretation of events. It's not based on any hard science or hard evidence. It's just a speculative what if, right? And Eric Von Daniken's not alone in this kind of assertion.
I think it'd be cool. I mean, I'd love it if this was all true. Cool story. You know, that'd be awesome to realize that ancient aliens had been here and we weren't alone. But I'm gonna wait for experts who spend their lives studying this stuff to come to that conclusion, because I don't have time to study this stuff. And sure, I can go online and look at videos, but I'm going to be skeptical of videos on YouTube unless I know their source. I got to know where the information is coming from and who's saying it, why they're saying it, what they've spent their life studying, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Uncharted X actually goes through and shows you the evidence himself. He goes to Egypt. He goes to Washington State. You know, he shows you the stuff itself, the stones, and he puts these through laser technology with engineers from NASA and just shows how this stuff is way more precise. And I know he goes off in the left field talking about, you know, geometry and all that shit, but I don't know if I'm right about the Eric Von Daniken guy. It might be a different guy saying this, but in Washington State, up in above California, there are ancient waterfalls that are just massive, like way bigger than Niagara Falls. Just huge cliffs that were obviously waterfalls. And all this could be the source of the global flood stories that we hear from so many cultures. And
Stephen, that's a different thing. That's a different thing. I get that there's a lot of rabbit holes with this stuff. Uncharted X, I don't know anything about him. What I do know, just by Googling him, is that he's a YouTuber, you know, and I'd be curious to see what sources he has on this. But when you're talking about folks like Eric Von Daniken, who don't even have a relevant degree in anything that they're talking about, you got to be really careful with this stuff, because there are scammers and there are people out here just to make money off of a story. And I would be worried that this is another example of that, you know, just because they want to get you hyped up on this stuff that, oh, nobody's talking about it because they're suppressing the truth, right? I mean, it's one of the oldest tricks in the book.
Googled Eric Von Daniken. It's definitely not who I'm talking about. I'm sorry I don't have the names. I just Googled Eric Von Daniken. Definitely.
Well, the reason why I brought him up, Stephen, is because this isn't revolutionary, right? This isn't like cutting edge. Eric Von Daniken wrote those books like decades ago. And he was one of the fathers of this modern ancient aliens movement, right? Like there's a presence in this in popular culture. I just looked this up on Wikipedia. You know how many copies that book sold? Hit Chariot of the Gods, 63 million copies worldwide. That's not being suppressed. It was translated in 32 different languages. There's no world government trying to stop that information. This is just a fiction. You know, this is just entertainment for people. This isn't rooted in anything science or history related at all. It's just got people writing books. I think that's where a lot of this comes from. But I don't know about this other YouTuber. I'm sorry to say, Stephen. I can't comment on that. But look, we are at the end of the show.
If you started watching any of, I get you. If you watched any of the videos from Uncharted X, I think you would really enjoy the rabbit hole that will bring you down. And it's definitely not Eric Von Daniken. I'm sorry.
I get you. Maybe on my other show, Zadanza, I'll give it a watch. We'll do a live reaction and we'll give it a talk. We don't do video reactions on this show, but maybe we can talk more about it so I can speak more expertly to what I'm reacting to. But we are like way over time here, Stephen. I do got to let you go. I'm glad I got to talk to you about it today, though. Maybe in the future we can talk about more specific historical ideas and we can like narrow down a topic. And I think that would be a fruitful conversation. But if we're jumping all over the place, it's hard to keep track of what's going on. But regardless, this has been a super, super long episode of Truth Wanted here. We went overtime because we had a lot of callers. Why not? Let's do it. Thanks for the crew.
Thank you,
going over time for that. Aaron, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, I had a blast. It was so much fun.
Yeah,
it's great.
I had so much more to say about that last call, but we really do got to wrap things up here. So is there a great way where people can find you at outside of, you know, this show?
No, this is pretty much it. You can watch me over on the nonprofits, and although I don't have an official ACA presence, you can probably email the ACA, and I'm sure someone would forward any emails. I'm also over in the ACA Discord, and you can send me a message there.
Yeah. Speaking of that email, if you do want to email the show, if you have an Uncharted X video that you need me to watch, or there's some other hidden evidence of Atlantis in Antarctica, I want to know about it. You can email the show. It's truth@atheist-community.org, or you can go to tv@atheist-community.org and see what's going on our website at atheist-community.org. And yes, there is a Facebook group that is run by fans for fans, which you can go to tiny.cc/FBTWG to interact with the other fans. And one last thing before we wrap things up, I am going to skip over to this. We got to thank the wonderful, awesome, amazing, stupendous crew that helped make this show happen every single week.
There they are. Thank you, guys.
Waiting for us to shut up so we can go home.
Is that a Crew Rabbit?
And the Crew Rabbit. Crew Rabbit, very essential, doing its rap things with the text. Folks, this has been a fun episode. We got to talk to a lot of people today. So thank you to everybody who's calling in.
Lots of topics, too.
Lots of topics for that. I just want to reiterate the We Want the Truth segment. We do have a caption contest for this. So we want to know, what is your best caption for the picture on screen here? Of course, we got J Mike and me doing some stuff. Really appreciate that. Please like and subscribe as well if you haven't already. And I think that's going to be it for tonight, Aaron. I'm Objectively Dan. This has been another episode of Truth Wanted. Remember to always keep wanting the truth. And I'll see you next time.
Bye.
Watch the non-profits and join the hosts in the live chat. Visit tiny.cc/YTNP.